Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Dave Tree.
That's not true. That's impossible.
You're listening to episode 9 of Making Tracks. I'm your co-host Mark Newbold, and joining me today is Dave. We do this every episode. It's probably getting boring, but I'm going to say it anyway. Introduce yourself, because you can introduce yourself far better than I can.
Hey everyone, it's Dave coming at you from all the cool stuff towers. As we have become accustomed to the show of Mark saying, introduce yourself. I'm becoming accustomed to asking Mark, what has the weather been like for you?
Well, first of all, I can't imagine you in a tower. I always imagine you in a dungeon, but that probably gives the wrong impression.
It's not far from the truth, though.
The weather, it's actually, I was going to say it's overcast, but I do have my curtains closed, so it might be perfectly sunny. It's been chucking it down today. I've run out twice to get my washing in. That's the kind of life I lead. It's not the weather it was, I've got to say that.
Well, you're missing it already, and your knickers got wet as well, so...
Nothing to do with the weather. So, how have things been with you? Have you been busy? Has life been good?
As we speak, we've just hit September, so we're end of the holiday season here. So all the kids go back to school, and for me, as a toy retailer, it sounds terrible and very cynical, but this is the God's honest truth of what happens. Everyone comes in. The moment kids go back to school, they come in, and it's like, nope, you're not having that. Put it on your Christmas list. And everybody thinks you're getting busy for Christmas. But you're not. It's still 3 months away. You still got a quarter of the year to go. But because everybody spent out over the summer holidays, that's it. You've had your fun in terms of toy retail. You're not getting any more. And this isn't just me. This is actually indicative of a lot of toy retailers on the whole. You'll notice throughout September into October, you get a lot of toy sales going on. Like your 3 for 2 at Boots, your Sainsbury's toy sale in the half-term holidays. You get a 50% off toy sale at Tesco and things like that. And it's partly to stimulate footfall into that particular product area, into toy retail, because it is dead. People are thinking about Christmas, but they're not actually buying for Christmas. So you get normally some good toy deals and toy sales going on this time of year. So if you're a toy collector, it's a good time to keep your eyes open and looking around. But from my side of things, I'm kind of and trying to pull people in. Can't complain. It's been a wicked summer. Since the last episode, Mark, what have you been up to?
I've got the good news that issue 185 of The Insider, my interview with Ray Parker, is going to be the cover article, which I'm really, really pleased with. So that's,
congrats!
That's kind of cool. So I'm pleased about that. And I've got a ton of stuff coming up in the next Star Trek official magazine as well. So the writing side's ticking over nicely. We're September now. I can't believe it's September. I don't know where this year has gone. I mean, we've done plenty. We've done Star Wars Fan Fun Day. We've got some more audio from there coming shortly. We've done all these other things that we've had happen. Fantha Day, had 2 Fantha Days this year already. But yeah, it's September. I don't quite understand how it's September already. But yeah, we've been very busy. Fantha keeps us very busy. Got loads of stuff on this episode. An interview that I did about 10 years ago with Dennis Muren, which I've never played before. We've got the first part of our 3-part interview with Bill Kimberlin. Bill's got a new book out called Inside the Star Wars Empire. He was the special effects editor on Return of the Jedi and loads of other films. So I've got a great interview with Bill, first part of that today. Let's go straight over to Star Wars Fan Fun Day. We had a chat with Richie Cunningham, believe it or not, and he played General Ramda, in the Rogue One. He was a lovely fella. Let's get into it. This is my chat with Richard in the sun, me and Richard Cunningham. Is this your first time to Burnley?
Yes, this is my first time to Burnley. Quite difficult getting to Burnley.
How far have you had to travel then? Is it a train journey?
London, King's Cross, but you go all the way into Leeds and then you come back out again. Yeah. So you go past Burnley to get to Leeds and then come back out again.
Obvious question, seeing as we're standing next to a football pitch, are you a fan? Football fan?
I'm a football fan, but not of Burnley, I'm afraid.
Do you follow them?
Liverpool FC.
So you're a happy bunny at the moment?
Well, they lost yesterday.
Did they? Oh, I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, they lost 1-0 to Chelsea. Oh, yeah.
know that.
Yeah, they shouldn't have done because they dominated. But yeah.
Well, I'm
yeah,
helping Fantasy, so I'm happy. So we took a point off you as well.
Yeah.
We need the point more than you guys do.
You still might survive. You might survive.
If we get that draw, if we get the Swansea-Southampton draw on Tuesday, we've got a chance.
Mind you, I like Swansea as well, so...
Yeah. They've done well. Cardiff coming up.
I don't want them to... So many teams... But Huddersfield as well, they earned a point the other day.
Patrick Stewart's favourite team, Huddersfield.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he's a happy bunny as well.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful day.
Yeah.
As you say, we're in Burnley for Fan Fun Day.
Yes.
You're here because
of my appearance
in Rogue One.
Yes.
We never spoke. We interviewed loads of Rogue One guys.
Really?
We never managed to speak.
Oh right.
I feel like I'm making amends for it now.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, probably didn't know of me. Maybe.
I did know of you. I did know of you. Even though, and I'm remembering at the typo, I put Lambda, and you went, no, it's Ramda.
I know. Well, you see, the funny thing is that I trained at Lambda.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I say. I'm General Ramda, and I trained at Lambda. So it was quite funny.
Yeah.
It was quite funny.
What was the experience like?
It was intense. I was employed for about 5 weeks on it.
Right.
So it was a long contract.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit scary. Even Gareth was very, very scared of the project initially.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were actors literally turning up on set in tears because they were so. It was when you got on set, it was like really there was an intensity, and I think there was a kind of everybody felt kind of responsible for.
Right.
Like we're creating something which is iconic.
Yeah.
And I think some people found that too pressurised.
Well, given that film was an intense film.
Yeah.
By design.
Yeah.
And fans.
I think
you ask anybody, we love that film.
Yeah.
Do you think that worked?
I think it did work. I mean, I think I heard reports that Gareth wasn't letting people go to the toilet and stuff like that. So,
really?
But I think that's rubbish.
That's like that Friends episode
I think that's rubbish. Yeah, because there are some actors out there who believe that if they hold on to their pee or whatever, then that gives them an extra added intensity, and I just think that's
I would be the worst actor in the world because I'm like a leaky cat, but I couldn't do it.
It doesn't work for me. I need to go.
It's got to happen.
Exactly.
So, when you came into the project then, are you pleased that you played an Imperial? Because obviously that era, right before the original Star Wars where Rogue One is set, those two teams, if you like, are at loggerheads.
Oh, yeah.
Are you glad you were on the bad guy side?
Yeah. Well, generally, I mean, my work in TV and film has been for those characters that are slightly edgier. I played psychopaths, I played, slightly kind of nasty characters all the way through. But General Ramda, although being quite on the bad side, wasn't so nasty.
No.
But he just didn't really want to, he really didn't want to be doing anything. He didn't want to be, his job. He was just there on holiday in Scariff, basically.
Well, it's a nice place to go.
I mean, and then I kind of rationalised the fact that he then disappears.
I was going to ask that. Do you think he got out? Did he get the
he may have attempted to get out, but he certainly didn't stay around for long, and he left his lieutenant there kind of dealing with it all, and I think he just disappeared.
So when is the Ramda sequel coming out? You get your own spin-off. A Star Wars version of Benidorm.
I was auditioned for the Solo film.
Oh, right.
But they didn't realise I'd been in Rogue One.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not going to mention it.
No.
But yeah, and so I went through the whole of the casting for the Solo film. I said, "Is there a problem that I'm in Rogue One?" And they went, "Oh, no, not at all." So I went through the casting process, did a very good audition. I thought maybe they were bringing Ramda back or something like that. Then I walked out of the room. About 2 minutes later, I get a call from my agent saying, "You're in the wrong universe. It's not going to work out."
Oh, no.
So, yeah.
You could have been in your own prequel.
It could have been one of those. I thought it was going to be one of those Easter egg moments where, the same actor appears in 2 different movies. But he may have looked different, or I could have been in a mask.
You could have been a smuggler.
I could have been anything, I think it could have worked.
I think you'd have made it work. Were you a fan of the films then, back in the day?
Yeah. But I mean, it was more with Peter Cushing and Alec Guinness. They were the films that the first three. Yeah. I lost it a bit on I think the three after that. I lost. Yeah. A bit of interest.
It was made for a different audience.
Yeah.
So you were stoked to get that character to be, and especially being that vintage uniform, because that's so connected to those. Films.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean you can't describe what it's like being offered, and you go, oh my God, this is going to change my career. Yeah. May have not changed my career so much because I got cut so much. Yeah. I mean, literally, there was a lot of cutting going on in the final third of the film. But there's a hologram that I'm very upset didn't make it.
Oh, wow, that would have been cool. That's always cool to get a hologram.
It was a hologram that appeared in opposite Krennic. Right. Krennic gets a bit annoyed because I'm giving him all the bad information, so he swipes at me and walks through my hologram. And then he goes into a scene with Darth Vader. Right. And I don't think that scene exists in the film.
Okay, that's interesting you say him swiping up the hologram, and you mentioned in Solo, because they've just released the latest TV spot, and you've got Chewie sitting at the chessboard.
Oh, really?
Because he's losing, and he swipes the pieces off.
I had to do this move where I had to kind of like twist and just avoid the hand. But
so you're thrilled with your association, and obviously as a spin-off of that, being able to come to things like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the end, because I wasn't cut completely, it's still obviously great, and I'm doing these events and meeting wonderful people and whatever, and it's great. It keeps your profile up.
And Monday afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, it is a shame that General Ram didn't get what he deserved.
It's a spin-off.
But we'll see.
There's always the TV series.
Ramda.
Could be done.
Ramda from Lambda.
Eats all the spander, it's got to be done.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Take care.
So I've got a really embarrassing tale to tell with Richie Cunningham. I nearly said Richie Cunningham.
Just say
it. Richard Cunningham.
Yes.
And it's super embarrassing.
For you or for him?
For me.
Tell it.
Massively embarrassing.
Tell it.
So I met him last year at London Film and Comic Con, and I've got a nice little Rogue One poster. I don't really do the autographs anymore. I used to as a kid, but that was when autographs cost £2 for the photograph and £2 for the signing. Yeah. It was £4 all in, and now it's like, that's 40 quid please, and you're like, I decided to try and do a Rogue One poster, and Richard Cunningham was at London Film and Comic Con. I thought, that's quite cool, I'll get that signed, and there was a few other guests there and stuff like that. Nice to meet you, where do you want me to sign? And I was like, well, the poster is off Scarif, and I said, just up there where the Death Star bit is, that'd be quite cool, because it's like grouping all like the Imperials together. And we were like just chatting away, and I said, I really love Trolleyed. And he just looked at me and he just went, that wasn't me. I was like, I thought it was. I thought you were like the supermarket guy. And he goes, no, that was such and such. And I was like, I'm really sorry. I'm so sorry. I honestly thought that was you. And he goes, well, no, you thought that guy was playing this character that I was playing. And then he was just making me squirm. I mean, he was having fun, but I felt such an idiot. And all I wanted to do was like take back the poster and like sort of like bow away, sort of like Japanese, like sort of kamikaze. Like I'm done for so wrong style. It was on the sort of mezzanine floor, and I just wished it like opened up and engulfed me. I was so embarrassed.
You should have been.
But I thought it was they were the same person. Oh my word.
We've all done it. I sat opposite Kiran Shah, and I was talking to his manager, and I said, I loved him in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And he went, oh God, don't say that. That's Steve Roy. Oh God, I'm really glad you pointed that out, So yeah, we've all done it.
You did do it to his face though. You got away with it.
Until now, but that's nowhere near as embarrassing as your story.
It was, because like we were just both stood up talking, because it was really hot up there. It was like a furnace. And when I said it, he just kind of paused and he's like looking at me. But it was one of those moments that you're thinking, I don't think I'm the first person to have done this, because it was almost kind of like a, kind of moment with him. It wasn't like, sorry, darling, that's not me or anything like that. It was like a pause. He was like looking at me and I'm like looking at him. And then he just went, that's not me. And I'm like, oh, he knew the name of the person who played said part. He knew what I was talking about, but I was just like, just give me my poster and let me leave.
Probably made his day.
And the thing is, anybody who knows me is like 99% of the time I have zero shame anyway. But like for me to kind of like be like, I was like, oh.
Well, speaking of people making fools of themselves, they've just announced, not that you're a fool, Dave, but you did a good impression. Galaxy's Edge, which opens next year as part of the Star Wars expansion at Disneyland and Disney World. They've just announced that there's going to be a place there called Og's Cantina. And the thing that I think is the most unusual, and it's not that there aren't other places within Disney that sell alcohol, but they've said that Og's Cantina will sell adult beverages, meaning booze. What do you think of that? Do you think it's a good idea to have a load of Star Wars fans lurching around Disney World's half cut? Or do you think live and let live? What do you think?
It's one of those situations that you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't, because it's a bar. But the prude in me would say it's not actually a good idea. And I would actually be kind of not so much for it, if I'm honest, because it is arguably taking it away from a kid's environment experience for people to come in and enjoy it. And then if you're serving alcohol, it's a little bit more relaxed perhaps stateside than it is here, with the exception of the age side of things. I think you can sort of like just walk around, whereas here it's like squarely in like pubs and stuff like that. I also think, you know, the cynic in me is then thinking, well, it's actually quite a good play by Disney because they want to entrap people for as long as possible.
Entrap.
And if it's one of the locales within a zone that's selling alcohol, we know we're going to like get footfall there and charge whatever we want. It's kind of like, I personally wouldn't want to hang out there for ages drinking, and I don't know, it's a bit of a strange one. But I would have thought that in terms of the risk assessment from Disney side of things within those kind of environments, that it would have been not necessarily a no, you can reduce your problems by not having it there. I don't know, I mean, you got butterbeer at Harry Potter World.
Have you tried that?
Well, no, I was going to say, and you got it at Universal in Orlando as well. So to my knowledge, they only sell it in two places, and I've had a butterbeer at both. And it is just like cream soda with more sugar. You could do like Star Wars cocktails and stuff like that without it necessarily having to be like alcoholic. But I don't know. What do you think?
In Star Wars, you know, you had spice wine in the old Marvel comic that Chewie drank by mistake, and in the Han Solo books, you had Flame Out. You know, so there are sort of Star Wars alcoholic drinks, obviously. Star Trek always had the synthahol stuff where it was alcohol, but you didn't get drunk sort of thing. But Star Wars, I don't think they went down that path. I don't know. I think Star Wars Land is going to be pitched at families. And if it was the Star Wars Hotel that had a bar, obviously it's a hotel, so do your own thing. But I think having alcohol so obviously in the park did seem like a strange move, and just from a risk assessment point of view, and the fact that there are so many disgruntled Star Wars fans at the moment, I wouldn't want to get them too drunk. So, you know.
They're not going to be there. If they are there when they walk in, I think with any kind of Disney experience, it is very slick. Whatever mood you're in is quickly turned around because of that environment. So I don't think you're going to find that there.
That's a good point. And I think once they see the price of the beer, I can't imagine it being cheap for some strange reason.
I would hope that they have, you know, when you walk into the park and they do like the meal deal vouchers, and you kind of, you know, if you've got the Mickey Mouse cup and stuff like that, do you reckon they'll have a green milk free refill? And you walk up to the refill station, and you know where I'm going with this, don't you?
I totally do.
The refill station is like just like this thalasiren there, and you're like milking the thalasiren for your refill. That I would pay good money for.
I'd pay good money to get blue milk from an old lady who's obviously overdubbed.
Yeah. That would be quite cool. But just like, are you on the thalasiren meal plan? You know, kind of thing. You just go, get your free refill at these stations.
It's Tuesday night. Time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. Welcome to Making Tracks.
Our next guest is a fella called Bill Kimberlin. He's just released his autobiography. It's called Inside the Star Wars Empire, all about his experiences working on Return of the Jedi. He was the visual effects editor. He worked on SB-19, which was the classic shot from Jedi, 63 elements, optical elements, biggest special effects, optical effects ever done. Fascinating guy. I had the chance to speak to him last week. It's the first part of our chat. It's going to be over the next 3 episodes. Fascinating guy. So this is me and the first part of our chat with Bill Kimberlin.
Let me set the scene for you. When I first came to work for Lucasfilm's Industrial Light and Magic. So the company was in Marin County at that time. This is just over the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. And it comprised 3 locations, really. George's house in San Anselmo, George's ranch, Skywalker Ranch, out in Lucas Valley, which is a misnomer, really. It was originally founded by a man coincidentally called Lucas. And then there was our complex, which consisted of about 6 buildings on Kerner Boulevard in San Rafael. And this was what you would call on a real estate map a light industrial area. You may recognize that term because George added the word magic to it and got us industrial light magic. So I worked in D building, and D building was next to C building, where George had his cutting rooms while we were working on Revenge of the Jedi. I know he changed the name, but it'll always be a Revenge of the Jedi to me, because I still have all the stickers and coffee cups and posters that say Revenge. So my job was to be a visual effects editor on the space battle sequence of Jedi. And I was brought in because I was a film editor. I had worked as a film editor in San Francisco for 12 or so years. And I had made my own films, and I'd made a feature film called American Nitro. And so most of the people at ILM, I think they tended to focus on a single shot. And they wanted someone who had the feel for an entire sequence, thus an editor like myself. That's one thing I heard anyway. And we were kind of a dirty dozen collection of people in the sense that there weren't that many people that came up from Hollywood. When ILM moved from Hollywood to San Rafael, the number of people who came was limited because it was really the only studio in Northern California at the time. And so if you finished your job, unlike Los Angeles, you couldn't simply walk across town and find another studio to work for. So we tended to hire a lot of people from Marin. And my friend who worked there just before I did said his interview was in a bar room in Fairfax, another little town in Marin. So it was a group of oddball characters in some ways. There was a cable car conductor. There was a former dentist who worked for me. There was a guy who was on the Swiss Ski Patrol and had done the opening stunt in one of the James Bond's film. There was a guy whose grandfather invented the Yellow Pages, a Green Beret, an Ice Capade star. So all kinds of people worked there. And I think somehow that uniqueness of personality leaked over into the movies and made them a little bit better than they otherwise would have been.
So how do you think it was that Lucasfilm and ILM specifically was able to take, you've just basically mentioned a circus of like completely different personalities and people and skill sets. How was ILM able to sort of merge that and morph that into something that spat out at the other end? What was, probably the best visual effects, certainly of its time. They still hold up well now. How do you think they made that work?
Well, I think I can only speak for my case. When I got there, I had not worked a lot in 35 millimeter, and I certainly hadn't worked in VisVision, which was our main way of shooting backgrounds. And you were given a lot of freedom, a lot of leeway, a lot of responsibility was simply handed to you. And you, of course, knew that you were working on a big-time motion picture, but more than that, you were working on something more than a movie. By this time, we'd had Star Wars, we'd had Empire, we'd had Raiders. They were extremely popular. Yeah. We had kids going through the garbage cans. We had kids writing us letters. And when you get these kind of experiences, I think it makes you try a lot harder. Who wants to let down all the little children of the world because you aren't doing your job right? So I think it bucked us up in that sense. And I know that when we would become a little bit cynical after working on something literally for a year or two, hearing lines like, many Bothans died to bring you this information. You know, when you hear that 500 times, you start to make jokes about it and stuff. Yeah. But always we came back to the thing of, you know, there's a little kid in Japan and he's just written us a letter and we really have to do a good job.
So you were very conscious. I mean, it's easy now in 2018 to look back, and new fans coming into it. You know, it's almost mythical, the making of that original trilogy. But you were very conscious because Star Wars had been so crazy huge and Empire had done so well. And as you say, Raiders had broken records. You were very conscious that it wasn't, like you just said, it wasn't just a film. It wasn't a level above. There was a consciousness of that within the team at ILM and Lucasfilm in general.
I think we realized these were more than just films. These were the hopes and dreams of little kids all over the world. And when you went to someone's house, I used to go to a lot of open houses in those days, and you'd go through the kid's bedroom, and it was wall to wall Star Wars toys. Yeah. And of course, this is what kept it alive, that and the videotapes from one movie to the next. You know, I remember when George came in and he said, we're going to restore Star Wars. You know, there's some things in there that I always wanted to do and I couldn't afford to do it. And now I can. So we're going to go back and fix this up. And so he brought his original print down to the screening room at ILM and ran it for us and talked about the sequences that he wanted to make adjustments to or change. And it started out to be a small thing, and it became a much bigger operation as George really sort of got into it. And I remember thinking to myself, now what little kid is going to want to see, you know, the movie that his parents like? You know, is that likely? It didn't seem like it at the time. You know, I didn't want to see when I was a kid the stuff that my parents listened to. Yeah. But the video had kept it alive. And so parents got a big kick out of taking their children to see something that they loved when they were a kid.
Now, you mentioned, it was a question I was going to ask, actually. You mentioned the special edition era, rejigging what Lucas had done before, the fact that he seemed quite happy to cut into the original print and considered the special edition the final version, essentially. When you came to ILM and Lucasfilm on Jedi, Star Wars was out. It was already well set in popular culture. It was still part of the zeitgeist. How did you feel as part of Lucasfilm and ILM when George was quite happy to go back to his masterpiece, if you like, and tweak and rejig? Were you comfortable with that personally? Did you think, are you sure you want to do that, George? What were your feelings?
Well, I remember talking to a friend of mine, Tom Christopher. Now, Tom is the person that George enlisted to do all the physical work, go and find the master that was kept in a salt mine, supposedly somewhere, go to all the labs in Los Angeles, pull all this stuff back, bring it into his editing room, and work with George as the shots came in that ILM redid and were cut into the original negative for Star Wars. Tom told me that he said to George, you know, before I cut all this stuff in, you know, before I change this, we could run off a duplicate master, so you will always have the original version. And George said, no, you don't understand. This is the original version, what I'm doing now. And, you know, from his perspective, he had a movie that he wanted to make, and the studio would not allow him to make certain changes or to spend more money. And it's like, I liken it to, let's say you have a Picasso and you live in New York and it's worth $50 million. And Picasso just happens to come over and he looks at it and he says, you know, I always wanted to add a little green to that, but I couldn't afford green back then. Would you mind? So what are you going to say to that? Are you going to tell Picasso? I mean, artists traditionally have been changing their work over time. Novelists go back, writers of all kinds, painters, they never seem to be finished. And my feeling is, who is to tell the author, who is to tell the filmmaker that they can't make some corrections to their work?
Yeah.
It's different when the studio comes in or someone later comes in. But when the artist himself does it, I think we have to respect that. And there are still original versions of all three of them that exist.
Very true. He was in a unique position, wasn't he? Not many filmmakers have that opportunity to go back and do what he did, especially because Star Wars had been so huge in popular culture and never really gone away.
Right. Well, I remember I was there the morning that E.T. broke all the records and pushed Star Wars out of the #1 largest box office hit of all time. And someone asked George what he thought about that. And he said, good, now maybe they'll leave me alone. You know, here's a guy who he wanted to live a normal life. When I first came to ILM, I think it was my first week, and there was a little coffee shop next door that we all went to after morning dailies, and to get a cup of coffee or a donut or something. And I'm sitting there, and George walks in alone. He walks up to the little coffee bar there, pours himself a cup of coffee in a styrofoam cup, pays for it, and walks out the door. And I thought to myself, you know, doesn't this guy have somebody to go get a cup of coffee for him? But that's not what it was about. He wanted to live his life as a normal person. And he was pretty much able to do that living in Marin. People knew who he was, but they wouldn't bother him. He would sign things for children, but not for his executives. I remember one time a bunch of executives brought some stuff into a meeting with him, and he said, look, this is not a game show. This is a business. And he wouldn't sign anything for him. So he was also a very reticent man when I first met him. I had a friend who stuck out his hand saying, George, I've worked for you for 2 years and I've never met you. And George practically jumped backwards. Over the years, he's gotten more comfortable with being around other people. And now I'm sure he's totally different. I'm talking about back then. So this is the kind of artist. I mean, I like to say, what other artist in the world has there ever been? George made his billions by selling movie tickets, not by going public. He never went public. It's easy to go public these days in Silicon Valley and become a billionaire. But how many people have done it by simply selling movie tickets? I mean, that's quite an accomplishment. There's very few artists who are able to achieve that level of success by simply doing the work that they do as artists.
That's a good point. It's George and P.T. Barnum, isn't it? You know, it is putting bums on seats, as we say in the UK. He got people in through the doors and got us watching all those films.
Right. The Harry Potter series is the only other artist I could think that's pretty much just made, as I understand it, her fortune by selling books. You know, There's movies in there too, and Broadway plays and stuff. But there aren't very many people today that can do that. So I think it's quite an accomplishment. George will be remembered as a far greater character than Steve Jobs in the future. I mean, because he virtually took Hollywood kicking and screaming into the digital world, created digital editing, digital projection, digital characters, digital everything in a world of Hollywood who doesn't want to pay for anything and certainly doesn't want to invest any money. If they find something that they think is innovative, they'll simply buy it.
Bill was a great guy. I mean, we started the interview. There was no preamble. He just went straight into it. So it was the easiest chat. It's very rare I don't have to edit an interview. I hardly had to edit this interview. There was one flub in the middle and that was it. And it was my flub. So it was the easiest thing ever. He was a really, really interesting guy. And if you ever see a photograph of him, he really honestly does look like Richard Dreyfuss. I can understand why he gets confused for Richard Dreyfuss. Because if you see the two of them together, they're kind of identical. It's kind of freaky.
Does he get mistaken for Richard Cunningham, though?
Well, this must happen a lot. I just wish you'd gone up to that fellow from Rogue One and said, I loved you in Happy Days, and just similar his reaction would have been that would have been priceless.
Oh, this is going to kill me, isn't it?
It's totally going to kill you, and it's going to come back and bite you on the bottom. Now, talking about special effects, and we do have one more interview coming up on this episode, very relevant to special effects. What was the visual effect in the original trilogy stood out to you the most? Which one gripped you the most? Do you have a close affinity to? Which special effect just did the best for you?
This is actually a really easy one for me to answer. I've often thought about, is it because it was something quite vivid to me as a kid that I remember? But watching it now, it's like, no, it's like so good and so fleeting and very, very simple. Well, it's not simple at all. That's doing a disservice. But compared to everything else that goes on, and it's actually in Empire Strikes Back, the Battle of Hoth, when they sound the retreat, it is literally a split second, but they all start falling back and you have the rebel soldiers. It's a wide shot. The rebel soldiers are all running back and you just have the AT-ATs in the background. And for the first time, you get that true sense of scale of what it is that they've been up against. Because up to that point, you see the walkers and it's like, oh, they're big, and you see the snow speeders, but it's only really then when you're seeing them running and like the AT-ATs are walking and one of their heads moves in, you know, where you got the three walkers there, you really see that it was just completely futile. There was no way that they were going to get around this. It's literally only 2 seconds, but I absolutely love it because you get like the expanse of Hoth and how big that battlefield was. You get the idea of the scale of the AT-ATs, and they are interacting with like a real life shot of like all these guys like running away from like the trenches back towards the camera, and like you've got these massive war machines dominating the landscape there. Don't get me wrong, there are so many to pick from, but I absolutely love that particular shot because it literally gives context to everything that was going on at that single point in time. It's just so short and throwaway, probably not the most technical or anything else, but I just absolutely love that point. It's like, wow, that is phenomenal.
My favourite shot is pretty much anything in the asteroid chase, but there's one particular shot when you see the Falcon, the music's just ticking along, and you see the Falcon and it swings towards the camera, like right at the camera, and then swings away. And I've always just the kinetic feel of that shot. And they could do it now and it would look better and slicker and it would just look more real, inverted commas. But I think that particular shot was just priceless. There's so many in the original trilogy because being limited by the technology, you have to be more inventive and you have to be more stylish and more judicious with the shots that you choose. Because
definitely.
They're tied down by the budget, they're tied down by the technology. The stuff that they were doing, they were really on the edge of their technology. And the next person that we're going to speak to worked on Empire, very specifically the scene that you've just talked about, the AT-AT scene, Dennis Muren. I spoke to Dennis. This was from about 10 years ago. This is 2007, 2008. I had a little listen to the audio. And it was a lot better, the audio, than I thought it had come out. Bearing in mind, I recorded it on a dictaphone with a speakerphone and me just talking, lying on my living room carpet in my old house. So I tidied it up a little bit. And this is the first of 2 parts. This is the first part of my chat from about 10 years ago with, good grief, I don't think anybody alive has got more Oscars than Dennis Muren. I think he won 9. So this is me chatting with the legend, Dennis Muren.
As an effects artist, you're known for your work with ILM. Of all the projects that you've done for ILM over those many years, which ones stand out to you the most for various reasons, for technical reasons or for personal reasons?
Well, probably 2 or 3, and one of them would certainly be Empire Strikes Back, like the hardest film that I ever worked on, and one of the most rewarding. I mean, I just was real excited about it. I thought the work came out really good, and I liked the movie a lot. And that's because we had just moved up from Los Angeles to San Francisco, and we had to crew up all the people locally up here, an awful lot of them locally, because we didn't have very many that came up from L.A. per show. And it was just very difficult. If you look at Empire compared to the original Star Wars, it's like far more complicated, and it was just much more of a challenge than the first Star Wars was. So that was really amazing. And then also I really enjoyed the period around Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park, when when we were really, trying to get the digital comping working and getting the CG imagery working so that we could actually budget a show and deliver it on time and everything like that.
Would you say that was the most important period in your effects career, that sort of early digital age, or?
I guess, it had the most influence, I suppose, that I was really involved with. I mean, Star Wars was certainly influential, but, the digital stuff was pretty amazing because that's, we sort of were trying it out using Macintoshes and Photoshop and everything really early on, see how consistent all the stuff was, and just to get used to looking at a monitor. It was pretty clear that it was going to be a revolution because, suddenly you could do stunt work, safely. Cables, and pads that people could fall on and all this rigging, and then yet the movies would look like that stuff was never there. Way beyond special effects. So that was really great when that finally came in and now everybody's doing it.
Well, you were an effects cameraman on Star Wars, was it?
Yeah, Richard Edlund and I were the two main cameramen on the effects.
And then obviously you did work on Galactica and Close Encounters, so that was a really fertile period for effects, wasn't it, back then?
That was great, yeah. And then, I always thought it was going to end in a year or two, because there had been a few little blips where there were special effects movies. There was one in, 1974, where there were 2 or 3 films, and there was one, I think another one in the late 60s, but very few, and they would only last for a couple of years, and they'd be gone again. So none of us who'd been around expected this to go on past 1978, 1979, but It just did keep going and still is today.
Because you had some wild times early days at ILM. I mean, there was all the stories of the pool out back and the laid-back atmosphere, but I mean, the work obviously got done back then, didn't it? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you miss those days?
You mean maybe the camaraderie of it, but it was pretty nerve-wracking on that because, you never know what the outcome is when you're in the middle of something, right? And
that's true.
Like that show was never going to get done. Same with Close Encounters. It seemed like it was never going to get done. Empire Strikes Back, never going to get done. But somehow, I tell you, in the last 3 months, there's just an amazing transformation that happens with an entire crew, and it's still going on. I'm sure it happens over there and happens here. Everybody just starts getting on the same wavelength. Everything happens faster, and the work is better, and you get these massive shows get done. And, now that we realize that, we can sort of plan for it. But back then, it seemed like, this is the end. This will never get done, not to change the release date. It's going to be a disaster, and yet they always got done, even back then.
It was a close call. I'm sure I remember reading somewhere that when Empire was finished, the final sequence with the ships before the closing credits, that it was a very close call getting those effects finished. Yeah,
my memory is there's 30 70mm prints that were made that are not of the finished shots.
Really?
In them. And that's what I remember. And our hope was they were going to send them far away, like to Antarctica or something, and never see them.
Let the penguins watch them.
That's true. That's very true.
I was very fortunate, actually, to interview a fellow who I know you're familiar with called David Ankrum, who you and David's brother used to make little cine films back in the early 60s.
Kerry and David. So where do you know him from?
Well, because through the website we do a lot of interviews, and I interviewed a fellow called Christian Simpson, who was Hayden Christensen's stand-in on Revenge of the Sith, and he happens to know David from on-set and conventions and put me in touch with David, and we interviewed him, and I did a bit of research and found out that you guys knew each other from way back. So you got any good memories from those days?
Oh, that was really great. I was a fan of science fiction movies when I was a kid, and I remember coming home when I was probably about 14 years old, and my mom saying, "You won't guess who moved into the neighborhood. General Ankrum." They called him General Ankrum, but just as a joke, because he was always a general in the movies. And so here Morris Ankrum moves across the street from me, and then he has these 2 great kids, David and Kerry. And, I just made a bunch of home movies with those guys. And some of them are, I don't know if you've seen the Equinox DVD. They're on the Equinox DVD, both of them are.
He told me that, yeah.
Yeah, but they look, pretty young. You wouldn't really recognize them. But anyway, that was really, it was great. And then we did a little museum in there of photos from all been collecting from science fiction, horror films, stuff like that. And it was through that I met Phil Kellison, who was working on a movie called Jack the Giant Killer. He just lived in the neighborhood and saw this little sign we put in our front yard on one Saturday, and he happened to stop by and said, "Hey, I'm working on a movie that's got special effects in it. Come and visit." And we found, my mom or David's mom or somebody to drive us down into Hollywood to see it. And that was kind of where I first made, and those guys made their connection with Jim Danforth and other folks that just led to being able to understand that movies were made by people, and not some sort of magic thing. Even though we only lived a half hour from L.A., it was still hard to imagine when you saw a movie in a theater how it was actually made, and especially a special effects film.
Well, it's cool because he actually sent us a photograph of the three of you, himself and his brother and you, in that room with all the pictures. Yeah. I think he dug it out from somewhere, so I'll pass it on to you. I'll pass it through Megan. Yeah. But it's a very cool picture.
I just found a photo of his dad there, too, also, in the room, too. I don't know if he's sent you that one.
He hasn't yet. I'll mention it. What were your early film influences then? Obviously, I would imagine effects movies, but maybe not necessarily so, because obviously, being an effects supervisor, you also want to tell a story, not just dazzle with effects. What were your early influences?
Yeah, they really have been effects films. I liked, of course, the Harryhausen films and King Kong, but I also liked other kinds of effects films, like, the Invisible Man movies, anything that in Wizard of Oz, the tornado and that, and dams breaking, dam busters and stuff. And I used to photograph with my 8mm camera, off the TV screen of the effects sequences. This is long before there was, videotape or anything.
Yeah.
And, and study them and take still photos off the TV screen and study those and everything. So there was really no way to see an image, to hold an image in your head unless you did something like that, took a still photograph of it. And they were shown very, very seldom. So I think a lot of what I developed, and probably, I'm guessing other people around my same age, developed this ability to be able to hold these images in your head, sort of analyze them. And I don't think there's much of that going on anymore, because you don't need to. You can just grab a frame and do a printout and you've got it. But we never used to have that. And I think that's been a big asset to me, was on to be able to sort of talk with the director and could put in, if he has something in words, and I could just hold that image in my head and already have an idea of what angle it's going to look good at, what the importance of it is and everything.
Well, I always remember seeing The Making of Jedi and you and some of the other guys setting up the little speeder bike run with the figures just to get the animatics ideas and such. So, yeah, I suppose to visualise it, it's got to be very, very important.
Yeah, very important, right? Yeah, that of course, meant that we got it out of our heads and onto videotape. As back then, I remember we did that with the first little handheld video camera that had ever come out. It was about the size of, 5 inches by 7 inches or something like that. And we just got in from Japan. Still had all the Japanese label on it, but it was small enough that we could use it ourselves. We didn't need a technical crew to do it. So I just thought, let's try this thing and see if we can do a little animatic with it. And it worked great.
Do you think, obviously, when digital came to the fore in the late 80s and especially the early 90s, had optical effects gone as far as they really could? Had they reached the limit that they could go to? Or do you think there might have been, if digital hadn't have come along when it did, do you think there could have been more to be done with optical effects?
I think that optical effects and even traditional effects, if the money had been put into developing and improving those techniques, they could have been made better.
Yeah.
But there just literally wasn't anybody except George and for a while to really, and a few other people to put money into that technology. We'd have problems with film shrinkage. So we'd shoot on Mylar film stock that didn't shrink. Well, that could have gone, and then we'd send it up to film lab for processing, and the lab would vary from one day to another, for example. But if you set up your own lab and you tested all the chemicals in advance and made sure everything was going through exactly the same way as it had 5 hours ago or 5 days ago, down to the, a tenth of a degree temperature-wise, and all the machines you could have gotten to work a lot better. But it was just expensive to come up with something like that. Nobody ever came up with anything like that. But I think you could have. And I remember even thinking at the time, all the money that was being poured into CG, it could have been poured into existing effects techniques, but making the quality better. But, at some point, the producers and all can't afford it. They movies, to improve the quality. But with CG, people and digital comping, they did see what they thought were going to be budget savings. So they were prepared to put money into it, to come up with better or cheaper movies eventually, But it's hard to justify that when you've got a technology that kind of works the old traditional way and you don't want to change it.
Were you quite resistant to it changing, or were you all for the new technology?
I was all for it. No, I was one of the people in there pushing for it to change, because I'd hit a dead end with it. I had a dead end with that stuff in about the mid-1980s. There was just no way to put any money, to come up with the money to fix it. We had talked about buying our own film lab up at ILM and doing some of these things I've just talked about. When you run the numbers on the cost of it, you don't see how you're ever going to get your money back on it. And you're not even really sure it's going to work, It's just thoughts I have that might have worked.
Yeah.
The digital stuff did come in. All that kind of research in computers had been done, with Apple figuring out how to mass produce products and PCs, and, Adobe and the Knoll brothers with Photoshop. I found a management graphics solitaire film recorder for actually doing slides. or business presentations from like major corporations that actually could turn out a digital image on a piece of film that looked like a photograph. And that was unheard of. But see, all the work had already been done. And what we did was we put those things sort of together. And the result was, like T2. And it actually could have been done a year or two earlier. I took a year off and from work and read a book on CG and did a lot of snooping around on stuff, thinking this was going to possibly amount to something, and managed to, because I didn't have anything else to think of. I wasn't doing a show. I could just sort of figure out how to make this work if it looked like it had a chance, and it certainly did.
End of the episode. What have you got planned for the next few days, Dave? What's life got in store for you?
Couple of things. Tomorrow I am off up to Norwich Vintage Toy and Collectors Fair, which is run by my good friend Nick Wells from In Demand Toys. I'm actually going up there to sell My Little Pony.
Why am I not surprised? Why am I not surprised?
More than anything else. My Little Pony, Care Bears, squishies and stuff like that. Yes, that is how rock and roll I am. I'm getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to drive 4 hours to set it all up, stand there like a lemon selling My Little Pony, break it down, drive 4 hours back, and come Monday I will be a mess. But yeah, I've got that on the go. I have a Lego preview coming up. So where I'm a Lego retailer, you get to go up and discuss the second, well, not necessarily the second half, the next sort of 6 to 8 months of Lego product. Unfortunately, it is confidential. So whatever sort of related stuff I might see, I'm not in a position to be able to talk about. But it's quite exciting. You go up there and they have in their head offices, you go around all these environments that they have for each of the different brands. Some of them are their own properties like City and Ninjago, and some of them are licensed, which the current licenses at the moment are Star Wars, Powerpuff Girls, Disney Princesses, Harry Potter's a big one at the moment, and Minecraft and things like that. I've got that going on. Yeah, we've just hit 500 as of today subscribers on YouTube. So that push we did at the last episode clearly worked.
It did.
So thank you very much.
To the 5 people that have subscribed.
Yeah, for the 5 people. Sounds terrible, doesn't it? But genuinely, I'm so proud of everything that Fantha Tracks does. From the sheer amount of content that goes out on the site that the team does there, to the podcasts that both yourself and Adam have been producing, to all of the other social media elements that Matt Booker takes care of, and the YouTube channel that Martin takes care of. It's just great time to be a Star Wars fan, because there's so much sort of information going on there. Is this, isn't it? What up? I thought it was going to get boring, where we got this sort of lag period until the new film. There's tons of stuff going on and loads of conversations and stuff like that. So I think it's quite exciting. But what about yourself, Mark? What you got going on for the next couple of weeks?
Okay. Immediately after finishing this podcast, I go and make chicken salad for me and my wife. So that's the immediate future. But in terms of Star Wars and everything else, here we go. List of articles to do. So I've just done an article for Starburst about the first 20 years of Harry Potter. So that's been fun to do. So I've been doing research for that. So that was done. Got an article to do for StarTrek.com. And I've got a few other bits. I've just started writing for a new magazine called Comic Scene, which is all about the UK comic market. So I've been asked to do an article for them. So I'm looking forward to doing that. So that's fun. So there's all of that. Prep for Destination Star Trek, which is coming up in October, which I'm very much looking forward to. So there's more going on there.
Yeah, I've got to do a bit of that.
Got New York Comic Con coming up, so got more things to get ready for that. And general Fantha stuff, because we've got stuff coming up. We've got Preston Comic Con coming up at the end of the month, 4 weeks today. So myself, Carl, and Paul Naylor are going up to that. There'll be a bit of a drive up there, so that'll be fun because we were invited to go to that, so that was very cool. More podcasting and general hilarity, it's wonderful. Where can people find you, Dave, if they want to?
If they want to, you can find me at All the Cool Stuff down in Fordingbridge, which is where we got a little toy shop, but you can find us on Facebook at All the Cool Stuff. Still not sorted out that Twitter, but you can also find me at the other show that we run, which is Farthest From, again on Facebook and Twitter as Farthest From. But failing that, the aforementioned YouTube channel, Fantha Tracks, please go on there. Check out the videos. There's so much cool stuff that goes on there, but there's been some absolute belter reviews of products. And also you can get to listen to the podcast on there as well. So if you've not heard the other podcast, Fantha Down Under by Adam O'Brien, you can listen to that on there as part of the playlist that we got going for the podcast and stuff like that. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe to all of our social media outlets, be it on Twitter, be it on Instagram, be it on Facebook, and be it on YouTube. YouTube. Panther trackers are everywhere. But Mark, if anybody wants to hunt you down, where can they find you?
Adam O'Brien is doing a bang-up job with Panther Down Under. It's pretty much going weekly now, so make sure you check it out. It's a great, great fun show. You can find me on Twitter at prefect_timing, but most of my time I'm the idiot behind the Panther Tracks Twitter feed, sending random tweets and making no sense to anybody outside of the UK. Panther Tracks, you can find us everywhere at Panther Tracks. As you say, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, so we're all out there doing our stuff. And but me, myself, and I basically live in the back end of the Panther Tracks website, so that's generally where you'll find me. So it's been a busy week. We've just moved servers. Brian's done a fantastic job of getting all the techie side of that sorted out, because it's very boring and laborious, and thank God he's wired to do it. None of the rest of us are, so he's done a great job with that, so well done, Brian. And that's pretty much it. So we will be back within the next couple of weeks, I would say. We'll reconvene our random chatter and bring episode 10 of Making Tracks. See you next time, Dave. Have a good time. Have fun.
Oh, I will. And just before I go, just a word from our sponsors, Nestle, Pure Life Still Water. I'm still enjoying said beverage. It is still spring water that will bring you the purest of life in your well-being.
I feel really bad because I'm actually drinking Highland Spring 330ml 12-pack, and I feel like
Don't worry, you can edit that out. People don't need Nestle are never going to know. Sponsorship, it's all about that. If you dare do that again, Mark, I'm done.
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologise to Highland Spring. I really apologise to Nestle.
Yeah, this is your Richard Cunningham moment.
I don't know what it is. This is my Gerald Ratner moment. I feel like I've pooped the hammock. I've really made a mess of this one. On that disgusting note, I'm going to say goodbye, and we will see you for the next episode of Making Tracks. Goodbye, everyone.
Toodaloo.